anyway. So, all right, today we're gonna talk about design. Basically, design for the purpose of, I think we may have done a video or some stuff on design. I know I've talked about it. But basically, really, design is either, when you plan ahead, you can, you think about your idea, or when you really understand design, when it's, the more and more you remember and you just really start to, everything really starts to make sense and it all starts to click, because it can be confusing at first. It just happens naturally and you don't have to plan beforehand. You don't have to, still use a sketchbook. I'd still always encourage anyone to have a sketchbook, but you don't have to spend hours of planning out your idea, working it all out before you finally bring it to the canvas or the paper. But still having a foundation of it is really good. It's pretty rare. I believe God does gift people with various amounts of natural understanding of design. And, there's always the, what do you call it? The prodigies, from a little kid, they're just absolutely amazing. We find that in music. I might keep comparing things to music. I find that's one of the easiest metaphors. I don't know why, it seems to just make so much more sense. Even the word compose and composition, we always hear that with music. When someone says a composer, we right away think of someone who writes music, but we don't often think about someone who paints a painting as a composer, whereas in reality they are. So but anyways, so even every music student, they have to learn their music theory. Some, it just makes sense right away. I always still struggle trying to understand music theory. Thus, I'm not a good musician. I have a son who loves music, and he loves music theory. He says it's fascinating to him, and then it helps him become a better musician. But if you take a jazz pianist or a jazz musician, they don't sit down and plan out the whole song. They just go. They just let it happen. They get in the zone and it's all just coming out of them. And then they're working together, and jazz musicians can only work together because they all understand music theory. And because they understand music theory, they can just hear what the other person's doing, and just their music just harmonizes automatically right with it. So, so whether the music theory has come to them through having to study it, or whether it's just has come to them naturally, it doesn't matter how it comes, but it's still important either way. So, anyways, so I talk about that because it's always hard to teach composition and make it interesting. And most students, especially being a classroom teacher, 95% of the reaction is, this is boring. Why do I have to do this? I'm not interested, blah, 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 blah. I was like that myself too. But I also didn't understand, no one explained to me how to apply it. So hopefully, that's my hope, is that you can understand how to apply it. So let's go ahead. I'm going to change the view here for the recording. Okay. Here we go. So we're going to be talking about, again, design, or another word that you'll hear again is to compose or composition. And I say how do we define that? What's a good way to define that is, here, just a second, let me straighten my camera here. I think a good way to define that would be arranging elements to strengthen, I don't know if these are the best words to use, an expression. Okay, so this is the end that we're shooting for, a stronger expression. So by stronger, I mean that it's more captivating. That it is more interesting. It's more clarity, you could say. Okay, you'll notice I'm not saying that it's prettier or more beautiful. If I do ever use the word, say that it's a more beautiful work of art, I'm actually referring to these sort of things. I mean that it's more successful in getting the expression across. Okay, and expression, again, you know, that can be like the message. You know, if you're trying to give a message, it tells the story. You know, if it's like an illustration, it tells the story better, makes the story clearer. Or it just simply expresses, you know, could express just simply a feeling and nothing more, that you're just trying to evoke some sort of feeling. Okay, so that's so really all we're doing is we're just simply arranging things. Okay, even colors. So first and then the idea of when we're talking about this is we're talking about how do you do it? Okay, because of course that's the question. If we all knew how automatically, we would never have to talk about it. If it was obvious how, then you'd never have to study it. It would just happen. And okay, so but this is usually the struggle of like, how do I do that? Okay, and that's, yeah, anyways, that's important. So so we're arranging elements. How we do it, people have discovered, I would never say that they've invented. I believe they simply discover what we call the principles. Okay, principles, if you want to be really strict, you would call them rules. I prefer to use something like this, guidelines. Okay, but anyways, these tell us how to arrange these. Okay, so basically the first thing we'll look at is what are these? When I say elements, what in the world am I talking about when I use the word elements? And then we'll look at, well, what are the principles? Okay, what do the principles tell us? So the first thing we should do then is just really quickly get an idea, an understanding of elements. So first of all, just to make sure we understand, I try to keep everything clear and simple. Elements is simply a fancy way to say things. That's all it is. We're just talking about the things. Okay, there's the things we use in art. In this case, of course, because we're talking about art. Now if you can go online and find this as well, but it can get confusing sometimes if you just go online and you don't really have an understanding, because you're going to find different artists telling you different things. Even I have come up with things that to me really feel like they're elements, and other artists, well, in fact, there's one of them, I never find it listed as an element, and in my mind, it just makes sense. But we're talking about just a simple basic thing like lines. okay? We're always working with lines and we're working with shapes. Okay, so we put lines on a page, we put shapes down, and we create shapes on our page. Forms, let me explain which shapes. So for an example, a shape is like a circle. A form, shape is 2D, two-dimensional. Forms are three-dimensional. That's the difference simply. So form is a sphere. So to make this look like a sphere, I gotta give a little bit of shadow. Okay, so I think that makes sense. Again, a square as opposed to a rectangle or cube, that sort of thing. Okay, so forms. So if you're doing sculpture, you're working with forms. If you're doing two-dimensional work, drawing and painting, you're working with shapes. But two-dimensional work, you create the illusion of forms. You make them appear to be forms, even though they're not. We work with textures, smooth, rough, so on and so on. Okay, those are another basic things we work with. One thing that people often don't pay attention to, and it's really important, is the space on our page. So, top to bottom, left to right, is really matters. Every inch of your canvas or your paper matters. And in fact, with space, in the same way, form is three-dimensional, space is also three-dimensional. It's also the illusion of going back in to the paper or the canvas, as if you could, like when I was a kid, we'd watch Bugs Bunny cartoons and the coyote, and so often they would step into their paintings and go disappear off into the painting. So that sort of space as well, as if you can actually do that. Another one I always also think about is pattern. We use patterns very often. Pattern is a great thing to use. Strangely, this always seems strange to me that pattern is usually listed as a principle. To me, it still feels like it should be an element. But anyways, so you'll find other ones. And if something else pops in your head that should be on here, that's fine, But I think you get the idea. Whenever you hear about elements, we're talking about these things. And you have to pay attention to them. Sometimes it's so obvious, especially like lines, ever since you're a kid, the first thing you do when you pick up, when someone gives you a pencil or a pen, first thing you do is you make a line. It just happens automatically. You move, as a little child, they move, so it's so basic. And as a child, you remember right away the power of that. You make a line, whoa, that's exciting. Something happened. You make a second one. So a little baby and you watch them and they're just mesmerized. Something is happening. They're getting excited by this. This line has an ability to affect what's happening inside the baby, or the little toddler, as they see this happen. But as we get older and we've seen it so much, we get desensitized, I'd say, to it, and we don't think about it so much, and it becomes so subconscious. We don't realize how important lines are. All of these super important. Okay, so we think about them, we feel them, all that sort of thing. Okay, so that's elements. Let me flip this over and then look at principles. So our principles of art or principles of design, however you look it up. What do we do? What are the different things that we do? Well, one of the things that we always need to do is we always want to try and create a sense of balance in our pictures. And we'll get more into this. Okay, so we like to have balance and different types of balance. One thing that's always necessary in art is there needs to be a sense of unity. how much unity is, that's what we do, is what we play around with. How much unity? All of these too is a degree of how much balance, how balanced is it, and how unified is it? We always want to have some variety in there. Another word is that you also see as contrast. Okay, simply some differences. Unity, another word you might see is similarity. Similarity, okay? So those are another one. And then you'll often see, you know, those, how you work with those, you can create harmony. Again, that sounds very musical. But sometimes you even create a sense of disharmony, and you'll do that on purpose, you know, what are they called? Discordant or something like that with music. Another one makes us think of music as rhythm. Rhythm, and this happens, you create rhythms by doing repetition, by repeating things in your picture. Okay, music always is repeating. There's just constant repetition happening in a song, and that just seems automatic. You'll have that, you know, that's why they have these things that loop, right? In music, they have these little looping things, and you play a little riff, and then you loop it, and it's looping in the background. Okay, it's creating rhythm, but it's also doing things like establishing unity, balance in the piece. So all that sort of stuff. Okay. In visual arts, that's a little bit more of a challenge of how to do that. Let's see, an emphasis. That's another thing. We're always trying to create an emphasis, or in other words, a focal point or a focus. One part needs to stand out more than the other. Okay, that's why in music we'll have a chorus. It's you know, comes at the end and then it's repeated again. In a story, we could also talk about, you know, an author does all of this when they're writing stories, or poetry. Okay, poetry really, you know, the lyrics of a song. But let's say in a story, your emphasis or your focal point would be your protagonist, you know, your main character. In you really, every story, it just has to have a main character. It has to be the, you know, everyone can't be equal. It becomes too confusing. It's the same in art. You really do want to have something stand out as your emphasis. Okay. There's other things that you'll find listed. Proportion will come up. I don't often talk about proportion too much. Anyway. Let's see, I can't think of any others, but I'm sure there's a few others out there. These definitely are sort of the main sort of things that we can think about. Okay, so here we go. Here's my challenge. Okay, so that took me about 10-15 minutes just to get through that part, and hopefully you haven't fallen asleep yet, but it's important to grasp that, our elements and our principles. So how do we use this? You know, I could just say, okay, here they are. Now use them. Do this, you know, do contrast, do harmony, do rhythm, repeat things, but towards what end? I suppose is really the struggle. And that was the struggle that I had when I was in college. I guess it was when I was studying in college. Is our professors never explained to us how to apply it to our art. And I went my whole time through university thinking, oh, this is for abstract artists, because every little project we did was some sort of abstract piece. Because it is abstract, it's in the background. Whoops. But I had no clue that it applies to everything. So anyway, so that's my hope, is that you understand, no matter what you're doing, no matter what your style, if you do realistic, abstract, simplified, complex. Oh yeah, there's another one. There's another we could throw on here. Simplicity. Simplicity is often a principle, but I suppose on the flip side, you could also have the flip side of that, which is complexity. Okay. You know, how complex is our piece going to be? Anyway, I won't keep getting caught up into that. All right. So what I want you guys to do is to imagine, to hopefully help you understand this, if you can, is I want you to really get your minds thinking about this idea of a spectrum. Okay. Yeah, for anyone who's maybe, watching the video, where English isn't your first language. Let's see if I can explain this word, because it's not a word we throw around, although it is getting, I think we're hearing more and more about it. A spectrum is like, it's a long, gradual change from, well, we see it as a line, A spectrum is, you have something at one end and something at the other end, okay? As opposed to two boxes, as opposed to two separate categories, let's say that. So we can't really, when I would teach this, I used to teach it as with two separate categories, and found, that we can think about two separate categories, but then very quickly, I ran into troubles trying to teach it that way. So I want you to think about a spectrum where this is a gradual change, okay? Like a color, we call it colors on a spectrum, right? Every color gradually changes into another one. Except the spectrum and color, maybe that wasn't the best idea, because spectrum and color is actually a circle. It goes round and round and round. Maybe if we think about this, light to dark is a spectrum, okay? You gradually get lighter or darker. Let's say if this is light on this side, you slowly get darker, 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 okay? White's at one end, black is at the other end, and, well, all the gray in the middle. You can't, you can't say, oh, gray is on this side and gray is on this side. It's gradual. All right, so here we go. So I want you to think in terms of a spectrum, and what is at the ends of our spectrum is a spectrum of, what would we say? I don't know what word to use. Characteristics? No, not characteristics. A spectrum of character or personality, a character of expression. Man, I have to, in all my years of teaching, I've never figured out what's the right word to use, because feeling or emotion is not the right word, because I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, yeah, you can, try to personify it with thing about people. But what I'm talking about is art. When you create a work of art, it's going to have an expression or a personality or a character. Essence, I've used that word before. The essence, maybe is another word we can use. The essence, the spirit of it. I don't know if that's going too far. I don't know if I'm getting too out there using that word. I'm going to put it down anyway. Okay. So here's our, let me get my page here, straighten out. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. Let me organize my paper here a little bit so you can hopefully understand this. Okay, so here is our spectrum. So I want you to think about this space here is my spectrum. On one end of our spectrum is we're going to put our dynamic, doesn't matter which side I put it on. but we're going to do this. We have our dynamic compositions, our dynamic character, personality, expression, essence, whatever. Dynamic. At the other end, the word I like to use is our static. So these are opposite of each other, okay? But they're not two categories, they're at two ends of a spectrum. What do I mean by dynamic and static? Well, on the dynamic side, okay, things that are active, okay? So if you make a work of art that, you know, is expressing something that's active or loud or bold, bold, fast, yeah, I don't know if anyone has their microphone off and you can think of a word to pop in there, you could do so. Static on the other side is something that's very still, okay? Still, calm, peaceful. Even or slow, you know, slow is, you know, like still is not moving at all. So, but basically, or well, slow moves over here a little bit. Quiet, it's quiet. Okay, so hopefully you can get the understanding of these two. Now, I didn't say emotion. Often when I teach this, people think they'll, you know, if I ask for other ideas, people often say happy or sad. But that's actually something different because they can go anywhere here. You can be happy and be in a very quiet, just peaceful, content mood. Oh, that's another word. Maybe mood is another one I could put up here. Mood. Okay. Over here, but you can also be happy, you know, at an amusement park, and you know, here you're just reading a book in a library and you're very happy. Here you're at an amusement park riding a roller coaster and you're very happy. So happy's on either end. Even angry. Angry is here. You're angry. There's a fight going on, but you can also someone, you know, maybe they're, you know, quiet. They're not speaking. So their anger is now on this side. So what I mean is, if you are going to create a painting where you are trying to express the joy of the Lord, it can be either way. And that's the thing, when you think about this, you can even get your expression stronger by not just creating joy, but what kind of joy? Is it a calm, peaceful joy, or is it an exuberant, you know, jumping up and down kind of joy, you know, on the other end? Or you're, you know, so the opposite extreme, expressing anger, or, you know, or evil, you know, something that is evil. Well, it can be, you know, if you're doing war or something like that, the atrocities of war, you know, that then it's going to be probably over here. But if you're trying to express just, you know, evil in the, you know, just sort of that quiet fear of suffering or isolation or something like that, you know, then it's much over here. So, okay. All right. I need to stop because now I'm just repeating myself too much. Before I go on, let me just see, is this clear? Oh, hey, Betty joined us. Good to see you, Betty. Any questions before I move on? I don't want to keep moving with any sort of confusion. Okay. All right. I'll take the silence as something very calm and still, but you guys are in a place of understanding. All right. So now here's what I want you to do. What? Oh, almost forgot something very important. On our spectrum, if we go from dynamic to static, we can actually go too far. and we can push it too far, and then it can actually hurt our piece. And if we go too far on this side, on the dynamic side, if we go too far, where do I put this? I'll just put it in a box down here at the bottom. If we go too far on this end, we can actually create just simply chaos. Okay. And now, if that's what you're trying to create, you want to create a sense of chaos, then you go ahead and you push yourself to there. You will very possibly, it's going to be, if you go so chaotic, it's almost too much for your audience, the viewer. They may not be able to handle it because it's such a strong, powerful piece. And, you know, that's your own decision. Do you want to do that with your audience, or do you want to take them right to that point of being able to express it without turning them off, and that they want nothing to do with your piece and they're just going to forget it and put it out of their mind because it just makes them way too uncomfortable. Okay. There's what was it? There was a quick little example of that in music. Once again, there's a story about a guy who was a composer, and he was pushing things to the edge, and he did so much stuff with discordant sound. He did a whole symphony that was all disharmony, and apparently it caused a riot in the streets from the people who had been there. They went out and started rioting. It was so powerful, but so far to that end. Okay, on the other end, if you go too far, I'll go ahead. I'll be bold enough to say too far. It will become boring. Okay. Now, again, if you're trying to create a feeling of boredom, you want to express boredom, you go as far as you can, but once again, there's a chance you'll go so far that no one pays any attention. They just look at it and it doesn't do a thing to them because you have so successfully created a sense of boring. They look at it, they glance at it and keep on going. Okay. So there we go. So those are two extremes. Maybe I should put them. So what we want to do is, I want you to imagine a teeter-totter. So our spectrum is like a teeter-totter. Whoops, I meant to make that nice and level. And so we have this, and then in the center, so here's our little fulcrum. Anyways, pretend my little teeter-totter is nice and straight and even. Okay. So here's what now you do is, so our teeter-totter on this side is, if we put things over here, they will push our teeter-totter. I should actually make this teeter-totter would actually be much taller because it can go at an angle. Okay. So what I want you to imagine now is all of these elements, depending on what we do with them, they will we'll place them at a certain place on this teeter-totter. So for instance, lines. If you have lines in your painting or your drawing, they're going to be somewhere on this teeter-totter. Okay. Anywhere from the middle to the end, and that all depends on how you create your lines, how they look is going to move them, okay, from one end to the other. And what you want to do is, the challenge is to make this. Now, if you were to follow the rules, just strictly follow the rules, and with no creativity, you'll make this thing so it's balanced. And it's so nice and perfect, and it's almost so balanced. It's just kind of it's just kind of, it doesn't do a whole lot. You actually want to play with that. Okay, so if you're doing something that feels a little bit more dynamic or something like that, you're going to want to put your lines and shapes and forms on this teeter-totter to make it start to tip this way. Okay. Your challenge is to not make it hit the ground, okay? So not so far that it hits the ground over here and becomes chaos, okay? That's usually the challenge. But how far can you tip it? Or the other way. I don't know if any of you guys ever did this. We used to do this when we were kids, right? We'd get on a teeter-totter and we'd all, we'd stand on the ends and we'd get more and more people, and then you'd start moving around, or I would even do it by myself, moving around, and it was always a challenge. How, can you tip it and just keep it, back and forth, but not ever let it hit the ground. So that's sort of the idea to think about in your mind, is tipping that back and forth. So let's go back to expressing the joy of the Lord. If you are going to try and create a sense of the joy of the Lord that's really makes you jump around, something happened that morning or the day before and you were just so, loud and jumping, you're going to want to express that now in a painting. You're going to do things with lines and shapes that are going to make this teeter-totter tip that way, okay? You take another experience. It was a beautiful sunset. I don't know. It was so calm and peaceful. And that evening, we just felt the joy of the Lord, but it was just so quiet and calm. Okay, so now that painting, you're going to need to do something with your lines and shapes and colors to make it tip that way, okay? And that's going to create a stronger expression. All right, so what do we do with these? Okay, let's go back over to here. Let's get a new page. Make sure you can see everything here. Dynamic, once again, is our one end. Static is on our other end. And I'm not going to draw the teeter-totter everything all the time. We're just going to put it in here lightly. Here's my teeter-totter. Okay, lightly at the bottom. So keep that in mind. I'm going to either move it this way or I'm going to tip it that way. Okay, what do I do with all of my lines, my shapes, my forms, my colors, and all that sort of thing? Okay. There's a few pivotal things that we can just point out right away here. Okay. With my principle, where did my principles go? I got the wrong page. Here we go. This is the one, you can see this better. Okay. First one, unity and similarity. If I keep my elements very similar to each other, I don't know, you guys want to speak? You want to unmute yourself? Can I ask anyone, where do you think that's going to tip my teeter-totter? Is it going to tip towards the static? Is it going to make it more static, or is it going to make it more dynamic if I have a lot of similar lines, a lot of similar colors?
Static, I think, for
Yes.
me.
Yeah, static.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty universal. You might find one other person, I don't know. But exactly right. So similarity, so we can, so what I do is I just write it right down aside. Similarity. We want to have some similarity, and that's going to calm things down. Okay. We think about that right away. So on the opposite then, on the other end, obviously, is going to be contrast and lots of variety. Lots of variety and contrast, have lots of differences. So I'll say diversity on this side. Get lots of diversity. And we'll make it very dynamic, okay? If I can just throw this out there, one of the cool things, because this is a bigger deal than making art, that this applies to life, because life is a work of art. And this is, I think, this is absolutely fascinating. If we think about the human race as a work of art, we have to do this as well. And when the human race simply does only focuses on our differences, and that's all we see is our differences, like our different skin colors, our different nations. Oh, you come from that nation, I come from that nation. Our different personalities. It creates chaos. We create chaos and war and just strife and problems when we only focus on our differences, right? So this is interesting. The world, this is what I always say. So the world says, oh, well, let's stop focusing on that. Okay, let's stop focusing on the difference between male and female, and we'll say we're all the same. Let's pretend we don't have different skin colors. Let's pretend there's no such thing as race. Let's ignore this and only think about how we're all one, and only think about this. We will have unity, and we won't have any more war and chaos. Well, it's true, but I believe we'll become a boring race. We will lose so much of the beauty that God has put in our race if we try to ignore this. Okay, you know, and so what's the world doing? You know, they're trying to say there's no differences in gender. Genders are all alike. We're just, you know, there's no such thing as race. You know, I think even just trying to, oh, I better not. I'll get political. I don't want to get political about it, but my whole point is, okay, I went off on a tangent here. I really think that God's design, he gives us so much diversity, but he wants us to celebrate that and to continue to look at how are we similar. And of course, we know the one main thing is our unity in Jesus, that there is one God, you know, one Lord, you know, we all have that in common, you know, we're all of those sort of things. We have other things in common. We have to look at those, but we can celebrate that anyways. So we as a human race, you know, we can get it to do this, okay? But we tend to make it go like this, clunk, fall on this side. And then we run to the other extreme and say, oh, we don't want that, so clunk, we're gonna make it go that way. And I think the beauty of life with God's design, it is this tension. And that's the exciting beauty of life, is this tension of, you know, keep doing this. Oh, and tension is actually important in art. We want actually create tension because that makes people pay attention. I didn't think about that. Yeah, tension will make people pay attention to our art. Hey, that's kind of fun. All right, so similarity, diversity. So let's take line, for example. We put here's our teeter-totter. If we make all our lines the same thickness, they're all just sort of straight curves, so let's say if we draw a cloud with lines, and all of our lines are so similar, it's just not as exciting when, it's just simply calmer and quiet, and can become chaotic. Okay, so this is line. On the other hand, let's say if we, so we make it, doing different things, our lines are doing all sorts of different sort of things. Well, it can start to get chaotic there, but, and we can have our lines getting thick and thin.
Okay. I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah. Like I joined late, so I wanted to know, like, what are we drawing?
Oh, today we're not drawing an actual picture today. So today, okay. Yeah. So sorry, so we're actually talking about design. So what we're talking about is what we would do with our paintings and our pictures.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so yeah,
Yeah.
I imagine that would be confusing.
Hey,
So,
Rick,
Yeah.
yes,
can I share? I don't know if this would be a helpful example, but I would love if you
sure.
wanted to.
I love
The,
any.
my art play yesterday was I'm not muted, am I? No, good.
Oh,
Okay.
I can hear it. Let me change.
I
Go ahead.
have like 4 different designs that were just play little sketches, and I think it might be interesting if you want to break it down and explain it on your scales, like if you can, if this is enough difference between these 4.
Yeah, that's an excellent. Yeah, no, this is good. Are you able to hold that for a minute?
Yeah, I'll hang in there.
And I could talk about it. Yeah. And yeah, well, okay, I'll try not to talk too much. But you can see, I don't know if my cursor will show up, especially if this shows up on the recording. So the one in the bottom right-hand side that we see, it's very filled. So what is happening there? So things that calm it down, okay? And this is where it comes down to, like I said, creating that tension of balancing it. Okay, so a way that you ended up creating that one to be a bit calmer is all of those arcs, those curves, those shapes that you created are all the same size. Okay, now, and that's, so that right away creates a sense of, it just kind of makes it more still. Okay, now,
Repetition pattern, right?
exactly, and then repetition, but the fact that your repetition is the same. Okay, now there's things that you have successfully done though to keep it from going so far to the extreme, to keep the teeter-totter from bumping the ground on that side and becoming boring. Simple things you did was you put them on a diagonal. Okay, so the level is not the same. The level now changes as they diagonally go up. Okay, so that brings it back and keeps the teeter-totter from going too far. Another thing that you've done is you have the color change. So you have a variety, you've got a diversity of colors. So that starts to tilt it back the other way again. Okay, to keep it from tilting too far the other way though, all of your colors are similar because they're all cool. So that starts to tilt it back once again to the calm side. So that whole piece ends up feeling quite just quiet, okay? But not so quiet that it's boring. So that's how that one is really successful. If we take a look at the one above there, okay? So now we've got a whole variety of sizes here. Okay, so boom, that moves everything over to the side. So it starts to tilt over to the dynamic side. You've got them all on different levels. It starts to tilt them to the other side. Okay. You've got them different colors. Even you've got warm and cool that keeps tilting it to the dynamic side. But from keeping it, how you've stopped it from going too far is it's all circles. So the fact that you limited yourself to only circles just tips it back the other way. It keeps it from going too far. Had you done a circle and a square and a rectangle and a leaf shape and a half moon shape and a star, and that would have started to get chaos. I just saw from your eyes. Your eyes, you know what I mean? Because you feel it. So that's a bit too much. Okay? So the fact that you kept it all circles keeps it. Okay. And then your lines that you've included, every single line is straight. Okay, so they're all the same and they're the same thickness. So once again, it starts to tilt us a little bit back to the other way. Okay, but because once again, all of your shapes are in different places, that means all your lines are different lengths and different angles. So they're all different angles. So once again, it starts to tip a little bit to the other side. And so you, without even realizing it, were you doing these with Becky?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you two are working together, okay, you're doing this and it's happening. And, and then we could talk about the other ones as well. The one looks like it's, at least to me, it feels like the Earth with a bunch of planets or something around it, the top left-hand corner. We could do the same thing. We could talk about how only using circles once again keeps it to the calm side, but having warm and cool tips it to the other side. Everything is very centralized. Okay. So nothing's going to the edges this time. You've kept it all gathered together in the center. So that starts to bring it to the calm side. But you've got, the two off by themselves. So there's some variety. You've got the one big one, you've got the three tiny little ones. So that starts to tip it to the other side. And then we could do the same thing about talking about the bottom one as well. And in fact, you can take every piece and really analyze it. You know, we could talk about your upper ones there too. We could analyze those in the same way. And every work of art, you can analyze it sort of on this teeter-totter of what have I done, which makes it feel that way. So yeah, that actually takes me to, yeah, I was going to show you some of my paintings as well to show that example. So thanks, Teresa. That's like really
And
good.
thanks for breaking that down. It's fascinating to listen to you tell us what we're seeing. You know,
Yeah.
I love.
And it is, and that's the thing. It's kind of like, you know, you look at a flower and you can enjoy it both ways, because, you know, you can take that too far sometimes. And that's not every time you look at a work of art, that's not the purpose of,
Yeah.
but it's there. It's like a flower. The more we discover about flowers and we pull them apart, we put them under the microscope, our admiration increases and we delight more in God. But yet God created flowers for us to just simply enjoy them as they are. You know what I mean?
And like enjoy the essence of them too,
Yeah.
not, you know, the information or understanding about them.
Exactly. But all of those things God designed into them so that they do work and so that they do bring joy. You know, that causes the color, that causes the shape, and all of that is in there. So anyway, yeah. Oh yeah, it's fascinating how you can just, like, as you study art and you really think about creation as a work of art, oh my goodness, it's absolutely fascinating. So you know, and actually that's really helpful, Teresa, because what can get really long and monotonous is we can actually talk about this with everything, with shapes. You know, and where do they fall? So let me take lines, for example. If I were to put lines on a spectrum all the way over here, horizontal lines are all the way to the very end here. Okay, similar lines because it's the same angle. There's no variety in up or down. Okay, vertical lines are probably a little less, but then we have diagonal lines are getting more over here. Okay, and then if we maybe over here, if we curve our line, maybe this is, you know, somewhere over here. I don't know exactly where they go. You know, I don't know if this, whatever, but you don't need to know. You just sort of have that sense. But the more it curves, you know, and you can just feel it, you know. And then this is way over here. This is way more dynamic, you know. But anyway, but everything moves along here. It's the same thing with shape. If we take shape, we can talk about the same thing with shape. Probably, I've heard different, some people just, they state this. I don't think it's that for sure, but to me, I don't know. I don't know if it's a square or a circle is really at the end here. I always think, you know, square, maybe a rectangle, maybe a triangle, and then a triangle on a different angle. You know, and then maybe a shape like this. I don't know. Sorry, circle is somewhere in here, you know, but then you have ovals are going to be different. And then you have, you know, shapes that are more like this. And then by the time you're over here, you probably have some sort of absolutely chaotic sort of shape. Okay. So hopefully again, you just understand about this teeter-totter idea. Okay. And we could do this with forms. We could talk about textures. We could talk about how you use space. You could talk about the types of patterns that you use and you put them on here, okay? Other things that we can talk about with, you know, with our principles, also what we do, okay, with balance. Or like, so what we do, oh yeah, with the space, like when we balance. So let me flip my page once again. I'm just gonna put a big D for dynamic and a big S for static, you know, our teeter totter. Here's our teeter totter. If we think about balancing things, for example, so I'm just going to do a couple examples. I won't do them all because a lot of it you just have to sort of think about. So if I take my painting and I draw my subject, I draw my vase of flowers. Let's pretend I'm going to draw a vase of flowers. If I stick my vase right dead center, here's my vase of flowers, it is going to be very static when I center everything. Okay, centering everything right on my page, sticking it right in the middle there. Okay. If I start to move that away from the center, either up or down or left or right, that will start to move me over on my page. By the way, so if you guys on camera phones, any sort of camera, in fact, you can always make it do this. You can always, there's always a grid selection to make these little lines. That is for something called the rule of thirds. And it's just dividing canvas into thirds, 1, 2, 3 horizontally and 1, 2, 3 vertically, okay? And if you read the book or you watch a video, they are going to tell you that you need to move your vase of flowers to either here or here or here or here, okay? That's always safe to do, okay? And they're going to tell you to do that because that's the fastest explanation of making a better work of art. I don't like to trap myself in that. I use it as a guideline, but I like to think about moving away from the center and how far do I move away from the center. If I take my painting and if I stick my vase, you know, all the way here in the corner, that's you know, maybe a bit too much, okay? What I have to do, that pushes it so far here, it's just kind of What I need to do is either move this or I need to get something else in here to balance it out. A big clock or something. I'll just say I need to have some, but I need something else in my picture to balance that, to keep it, okay? From there. Anyway, there's all different sorts of things to think about, but balance simply means where should I put it on my painting, my drawing, okay? So, because that will make a difference to make my teeter-totter tip one way or the other, okay? So when you feel something from God, an image comes to you, I don't know why, a feather came into my mind, and you get a, you know, and right away, oh, you know, I was praying and I saw a feather and I want to draw that, you know, or sometimes, you know, if you're doing prophetic art for someone else, I saw a feather for you. If you just right away stick that feather right in the center of the page when you paint it, it may actually reduce, especially if it is for someone else. If you're doing it for someone else, they may receive it like, oh, okay, yeah, a feather. They actually won't necessarily receive it as well as if you listen a little bit longer. Slow yourself down, listen to the Holy Spirit a little bit longer. What about this feather? Okay, and I really do believe you'll start to get a sense. Maybe it's not calm. There's something about this feather. In fact, this feather's blowing in the wind or something like that. It's really traveling and moving. So you actually are going to put your feather somewhere away from the middle, okay? Is the feather just straight up and down? Or does the feather go like this? Or should the feather be curved, okay? So this, I really do believe that even with prophetic art, listening to the Holy Spirit, I believe if we slow down and listen longer, we will even get more of a sense of that sort of thing. Okay. Even listening, okay, how big is the feather? You know, or is there a second feather? All of that will start to, you know, that's so much of that is how the spirit speaks. It's the same way in, you know, dreams. You know, I know when my wife asks, you know, if I have a dream, she asks about it, you know, because she has a lot of understanding about that. Things matter about it. The color, the size, all of that it's a big deal. Okay. Because it is part of the expression. It's part of what is being said. Okay. What else can we talk about to do this? Well, we've already talked about unity, similarity. Harmony is simply what we're talking about, is doing all of these things. Harmony is moving those things back and forth, you know, because we start to get our things, then we start to get lines on our teeter-totter, okay? And then we have shapes on our teeter-totter. And, you know, we have balance on our teeter-totter. We've got, you know, some rhythms or some patterns, you know, we've got patterns over on our teeter-totter. So every time we're doing something with, and our colors, you know, we're like, you know, might think, oh, but my colors, I'm going to keep my colors similar. So I'm going to have, you know, all my colors are going to be similar. So my colors are over here. All of this is what we're talking about with harmony. Okay. When we're doing these sort of things, it's harmony. Okay. And, you know, every single time that I have taught this, and I do start to ask people, okay, so if you want to do this, where do you think you put it on this spectrum? Where do you think you would place it? 99% of the time, people give me the right answer because it's actually inside. I believe God has put this inside of each of us. Some it's a little clearer, some it's a little fuzzier, but you know, I think that's part of where he says that he's placed eternity in our hearts. He's placed the divine in our hearts. It's part of being made in God's image. God understands this is how God works, and it's how we so we just understand it. Okay. But what does it look like? Because this, you know, Betty, I don't know if you're still with us, Betty. Betty asked a question. Are we drawing? Are we painting? So, oh, it looks like
Yeah, I'm near.
Okay, you are there, Betty. Okay, so that's a great question, because what I mentioned at the beginning of this was my teachers never told me, now what does this look like in an actual painting? So I want to share that with you guys. Okay, so we're going to look at a few paintings. I just have some of my own here. Okay, I'll grab this one here. We'll start with looking at a few, and I'll just analyze them. Okay, on your screens, how many paintings? Do you see a whole bunch behind each other, or just the one?
Yeah, I am seeing two.
You see more than one? Okay, so, but we'll look at the one in the foreground here first. Okay, we'll just look at this one. So this was a painting I did. It was called Leaving the Nest. Okay, so, and it's actually about a child leaving home. Okay, so it's done in a particular style. So I'm just going to show you, it doesn't matter what style. This is the style of the First Nations people in Northwest Canada, and actually also America. This is their style of painting. So the idea is this young eagle is leaving the nest, and then here's the parent eagle, you know, looking down. So I was trying to create a sense of, you know, real movement here. So movement is dynamic. So my tree is reduced just down to this type of shape. You know, the shapes have to do with the First Nations style, the native people, indigenous people style. But so what I did was, what did I do to create a sense of movement? He's on a diagonal. Remember, diagonals are moving, curves are moving, his wings are curved. Okay, this movement, which comes from him, is curved, and notice it's diagonal again. Okay, there's a lot of contrast going on. So I'm really trying to create this sense of, this is a moment. This is not really an overly peaceful moment. Okay. So there's, even with my background, there's so much stuff happening. There's all these different shapes, lots of variety of shapes. Okay. How do I keep it from getting too calm, or sorry, too chaotic though? I've only used really blue, 4 colors. Well, 5 if you include white, but black, red, blue, and green. So I've limited the colors here, okay? She's not moving, okay? She's not jumping up and down. She's just more in this calm sort of, you know, it's actually, I was trying to create the sense of sadness. So she's very droopy, okay? She's up looking down, you know, but he's rising up, okay? He's getting big. So we, you know, all of those are different sort of things. Notice no one's in the center. She's in one of the corners. Remember the rule of thirds? She's up in the one corner, he's in the other corner. So the two focuses, the two birds that are part of the focus are at those rule of thirds cross points, basically, okay? So if I close this one, I guess that makes it go away. Let's take something from the other to the extreme. So also done with birds. Here's another one done with birds. Or a bird is this loon, okay? So this one is just simply called loon call. This literally was done, I was out on a lake canoeing, and if anyone knows anything about the loon, they have this call that's very quiet, peaceful. It's just so calm and peaceful. And I was out in the evening, it was, you know, it was just so quiet. It was static as ever. And I really wanted to try and express that. And I wanted to create that sense of that quietness. So my colors, I've reduced it down to just blue and green, really, okay? But how do to keep it from getting too boring, I have a variety of blues and I have a variety of greens. So that pushes it back the other way. I've reduced my shapes to just these simple sort of shapes of trees. They're very flat looking. This is very flat looking. That starts to move it to the static side, okay? To keep it dynamic, though, they're very curvy and they have these pointy sort of shapes, okay? They're not just triangles. That keeps them from getting too boring. The rocks are just ovals, okay? Notice where I did place the bird. The bird is dead center, okay? Everything that your professor tells you not to do is, you know, never put your subject in the middle, or that's what your little booklet or YouTube video will say if you're a photographer, never stick it in the middle. Well, that's not true. You can stick it in the middle, okay? But what are you going to do with it? So by doing this, I had to do all sorts of things to keep this from becoming boring, okay? I threw a little surprise in what's happening here, this shimmer, which is representing the call of the bird because it is just kind of shimmery. Okay, so I've done things. I have contrast happening here. I've got a lot of detail happening here. So this gets more complex. We have simplicity and complexity happening together on the piece. The moon is in the corner. Okay, it's further pushed off to the side, so that leaves it a little less symmetrical. But the whole piece is feels very symmetrical. The left is same as the right, but not too much. So again, we can, you know, all of those things I was thinking about as I did that. Where's another active piece? Okay, here's an active painting I did, which represented my family in this little game we had. So, you know, the 4 boys, and, you know, so I've really tried to make this active, lots of stuff happening. So everything is on a diagonal, even, you know, the mom who's standing here, you notice even she is curved. She's standing up straight, but I've curved her. Look what I did with the arms and legs. I actually turned them into these curves. Notice my lines that I used, they keep changing in thickness. There's more variety, okay? So all of that. I've put in these other curves here, okay? I've got people looking in every single different direction. Everyone is facing another way. This guy's facing that way, she's facing that way, okay? From keeping it too chaotic, how do I keep it from too chaotic? Well, I contain it all together, which also adds to the expression of the unity of the family. It's only warm colors, okay? I've kept everything very warm, so I limit the amount of colors, and that keeps it from getting too chaotic, because I want it active, I want it very dynamic, but I definitely don't want it to feel chaos, okay? I want it to feel the opposite of that. So those are different sort of things that I was busy doing with that one. look at just a couple more here. Okay, the last two are a combination, you could say, of a bit of both. We'll look at this little drawing here of the guy in this sort of, it was called Whelmed by the Holy. And basically what I was trying to express is an encounter of, you could say, like being baptized or having an encounter with the Holy Spirit. We have this old guy walking, he's playing his drum. So I want a sense of this peaceful calm that's inside, that's very peaceful and calm. So this is all very centered. This shape at the top, which looks like a drop, but it has a spiral. And then this other spiraling shape coming down is all basically right in the center of my picture. He's right in the center of my picture. But then I did other things to create this sense of dynamic. Okay, the fact that it is spiraling, that's dynamic. What's happening with the rocks, everything is blasting out to the side, you know, and those little trees and stuff, and they're all on diagonals. Okay, every single rock that's getting blasted away from his drumming and from this encounter everything is on a diagonal. Okay, so that's going to make, that is moving. The sky, however, though, once again, in the sky and the air, you know, the spirit around him is very calm and even just stable. Okay, so even horizontal will create that sort of sense as well. Okay, so that's working with the two together, you know, so that's somewhere, it's almost like creating where the teeter-totter keeps rocking back and forth. At least that's what I was going for. And then I'm going to show you another more where that, one more where I do that again.
Rick?
Yeah.
Quick question on that one. Why is there an egg shape? Were you communicating something through the egg shape?
I mean, the whole overall piece, the egg shape sort of ended up happening unintentionally. And I actually am coming more and more and more to the belief that things will happen in our painting that I believe is the Holy Spirit putting stuff in our work that we're completely unaware of. Because that egg shape was never in my mind, and so many people have commented on that egg shape. In an egg, because the egg is one of the symbols of new life, right? It is. So, but I never put that in there. For me, actually, what I was doing is for me, it has just in my own mind become a symbol of like a temple or a sacred place is the arch. Let me just draw it. I brought this up here. I don't know why. I think it's probably, well, I do know why. It's probably just simply because you encountered this in so many cathedrals. And if you actually go spend time in a cathedral, I don't know. I know there's different things about the big cathedrals, how they're built and stuff like that, whatever. But boy, they sure just feel quiet and sacred to me. So that shape, this is actually the shape I was trying to create and what I had in mind, but it ended up looking more like an egg, which is really sort of interesting. So, but I just had it yesterday, a painting I shared with someone, and I meant one thing. And then when I shared it, I looked at it and thought, oh, whoops, I did that so long ago. I forgot what it was about. And what it was about was actually more exactly what the discussion was about. So it's wild. It's wild what happens with art. And so much happens at this abstract level. That's where so much of the Holy Spirit is. And if we're not paying attention to that, we miss so much of it. It's kind of like reading Revelation. The people who really study and begin to understand apocalyptic language, you miss so much. Or poetry. If you don't begin to understand symbolism and how poetry works, you miss the depth and richness of it. And in your own art too. If you take the time to enter into design, God's a designer and he speaks through design. It's with nature, it's with art and all those sort of things. Anyway, this was a painting just real quick, so it's called But Then Everyone Misses Out. So it was an expression of something that I saw happening, and it's just the idea of when we're so wrapped up into our own self, just for our own pleasure, and when life is all about that, we think, oh, it's just me, and that's what our world tells us, and that's kind of what it was expressing here, because our world says, my choices, I can do what I want because it doesn't affect others. The truth is, we are unified. Everything we do affects others. So what's happening on this boat here, this party, this chaos, what is happening on this boat is cracking and destroying everything. And this bird, who's completely separate from them, they're totally unaware of him, but he's being affected by what's going on, what they're doing, and they're missing. And then we have this beautiful sunset. And this actually all came from a real experience that actually happened on Vancouver Island. There's beautiful sunset is happening, and he's now missing out on the sunset, and they're missing out on the sunset. They're missing out on him. A life of self-focus on our own pleasure. So anyways, so I was trying to create this sense of chaos and peace at the same time on the same painting. And I had to somehow keep them unified. And that was the challenge. How do I keep them unified and yet keep them separate? So a few obvious things, okay? The boat's on a diagonal. My heart, the waves, all the water's chaos all around them. And so that's all curves, but I calm it down by the time they reach him, everything is very, very flat. The lines are all still, okay? I've got the jagged cracks happening out of here, cracking the canvas in front of the smooth, whereas these lines are very smooth and graceful flowing. And then you see how they get cracked and they get broken every now and then, okay? In order to keep him from becoming too calm, notice how I did this tree very differently than the tree with that other, the loon, the bird on the sitting on the water. So all decisions, all that hold a challenge of, tilting our teeter-totter back and forth. So yes.
Yeah. I just made the observation that the island in the distance with the trees is surrounded by the warm colors, but then it has the cool colors in the middle, and it goes from where the yellow is over to the trees. So it just seems like the transition and the connection, like that part connected these two opposing things and kind of emphasizes what you were trying to communicate by affecting the other, and the hot and the cool being merging and meeting,
Yeah. And actually, thank you for pointing that out, because I kind of forgot about that, to point that out too. When you're working in doing this, the reason I placed it here was for it to visually connect this to him, so that the eye, because our eye moves around. When we look at a page, we move around, and we have to keep moving around. And this helps visually that we can make the transition back and forth between the two. I've had students often, they'll put things on a page, and I tell them they don't, you actually have more than one drawing there. They're like, what do you mean? This is only one drawing. I said, no, because just because two things are on the same canvas or on the same piece of paper doesn't actually mean that they are together. So that's a good thing to point out, because I had to keep him together, keep him unified, but yet I want them very distinct in what's happening with each of them, so it's sort of this visual challenge. And that was solved. One of the ways I solved it was by those trees there. So, okay. Okay, so that's that one. So hopefully that isn't too confusing. Hopefully that is not too boring. Hopefully it doesn't put you to sleep. It's sort of one of those things you have to just sort of experience it and get involved in it. to really appreciate, and when you start to work with it, so
I don't, I was just gonna ask if, I don't know if you have plans for next week, but I would love to like start applying, like if we could have some exercises or something that next week to apply this. So, because I feel like it's amazing information, but it's like I won't own it until I start to try to put it into practice, and some exercises would help. Of course, anytime you're doing art, you're practicing, but like practicing and understanding at the same time would be so helpful.
yeah. And that's actually, because the first thing I was thinking today is like, well, maybe we should just start a piece. Maybe we just, and then in thinking that, it came to me as like, well, maybe I should give a little bit more on, if we're going to try and express something. So we've got like 20 minutes left.
Okay.
So my thought was actually to take now, maybe just keep using, because I kept bringing this up, is to, just a second. Is to take joy. And the reason why, joy, because joy is it's a great expression. Maybe you could do another, and it's not as specific, let's say, as hope. Hope, I think, is maybe more of a challenge. How do I express hope? Yeah. Because hope is a little more specific. Joy, I think, is a broader sort of term, but joy can either be way over here on this side. We can have very dynamic joy, which is very vibrant, and we can have very static joy, which is very quiet. And I also like to point this out because I think sometimes, I was actually in a worship thing where a guy got up front and he thought he was doing right. And he was saying you shouldn't, it was something about where should be inspiring joy in the students or something like that. And he said, as leaders, we should not be, we have to be up and jumping and moving around. Anyways, in his mind, it was interesting. In his mind, he could only see joy in one way. It was his own experience, is how he experienced joy. And anyways, and I just right away thought, joy doesn't look like that always. Joy can look like this very much. So that's also why I think my mind just went to joy. So my challenge is, could you somehow, and you could express joy and make it feel very dynamic, and then express it and make it feel very, very calm, very, very static, a very, more peaceful type of joy. Just like you said, Teresa, just as an exercise, take a piece of paper, divide it in half, do one on one, one on the other. You can just draw it. You can even just use the word. You don't even need to draw a picture. What if you took the word joy and wrote it or on one side and then wrote it on the other, designed it, or you can just work with shapes. What could you do with just some shapes and make a bunch of shapes as if they actually had personality and they could speak, and a bunch of shapes that feel joyful this way and a bunch of shapes that feel joyful that way. Or go ahead and draw an actual picture, maybe if a bird comes to mind, feel free. But how would you draw the bird on one side and how would you draw the bird on the other side? Go ahead and draw a person, even a stick figure. Use stick figures if you want. But what do you do with the stick figures? Where do you place them on your page? Okay, where do you do that? So, if we just even try to, just simple 5 minutes for each one, a couple minutes for each one, take a page. Where do we got? Take a paper. Put a line down the middle. And now here are your two things, or like this way, you can do one top and bottom. Do one up here and one down there, okay? Color, you may use color. I encourage you, go ahead and use color as well.
Hey, Rick, I'm gonna leave. I'm too tired.
Sure. Thanks for joining us, Katie.
I am. Bye.
Yeah, hope you feel better. Bye.
Mine's still wet.
Okay, so just to share our expressions of joy, see what you guys did. And remember, there's no right or wrong answer to this, really, right? It's just
I think mine's wet, but I think I can hold it up.
okay.
So I did dynamic first, which I thought was going to would be easy to do. The static joy is a challenge for me. I can't even quite conceptualize it. So I just thought of rooted and grounded, but my static has a lot of movement in it.
Yeah, but even if you had not written those on there, I would have definitely guessed the one on the right is more static, mainly because you just centered it, and it's so symmetrical, and that's powerful. But it's vibrant. It's still explosive. Like it's just like to me, it has a sense of bursting forth. But you're right, rooted and grounded. I don't know, maybe you're thinking a tree, but to me, it looks like a fountain. But it's
Yeah, thinking about rooted and grounded in Christ, and then that joy up coming from within and exploding within. And then I just stuck with the cool palette for the static versus having the warm colors introduced.
Yeah, you're right on track. Exactly. That's exactly everything I've been talking about. I think you nailed it. Totally. Awesome. Anyone else?
Sure, I'll share.
Elizabeth, where are you? I gotta find you.
So I was actually working on some when you were like talking and stuff. So this is what I was working on while you were talking. Were those two?
Okay. So both of these.
So cute.
Yeah. So were you trying to get a calm sense with both of these then?
Yep.
Yeah.
Very good. Yes, exactly. And you did, and that works with just your horizon. So the little boy on the left, definitely the horizon, putting it down low, that big empty white sky, like that's just all this similarity, all this stillness, but you keep from boring. I like how you put them in the corner, so it doesn't get too static. That's really good. You got the sand, the transition, that line of the sand and the water, you put that on a slight diagonal, and that works as well. But he just, he's straight up and down. So that, again, just all those things. Same thing with her too. So she's very up and down, her horizontal stripes on her shirt. Even the string to her balloon is very straight up and down. The balloon, I like you tilted the balloon just a little bit. So very good. So of course, if you're going to do something dynamic with the balloon, you'd have her dancing, and so you get all these diagonals, and you'd have this string of the balloon going on a diagonal.
Yep. And then I just did this one.
Joy. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Those spirals, that's going to just that vibrance. And then having your letters similar size is also, it sort of keeps it stable. It just feels stable. And then everything else is different colors, and it's spiraling, and it's diagonal. Nice. And even your line, see how your line changes in thickness too. That's going to also increase the interest of it and the dynamic qualities.
Yeah.
Excellent. Who else?
Yeah. I did a flower.
Is that Betty?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me hold it. Then I just show it to you. It is here.
Yeah.
Can you see this?
No, I can't see it yet. You have to turn your camera on in a minute.
Yeah, turn the video.
Video. Okay.
There it is.
Okay.
I can see it.
Okay, it's here.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
And is this the calm? Okay, here, show us both.
No, it's
let's see the two.
It's a flower.
The flower, yeah.
Yeah, with
And
the roots.
did you do 2 of them? Or just one?
The one for down, it's just roots.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you just did the one
Mm.
flower. You didn't do the 2.
No, I did one.
Just one. Okay. So okay, good. So what I would get with this one, and you're doing the roots of the flower going down. That was a part of that's a part of your expression, right? So
Yeah.
you were thinking like with the roots, so with the focus on the roots, the emphasis, the idea of that it's like grounded or it's stable and it's rooted. Is that sort of what you're trying to get at?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that what you've done is, so that sort of expression is probably going to be a little more calm, like it's more steady, it's still. So as opposed to a flower that, let's say, is blowing in the wind, like it broke, a wind was blowing and it's sort of floating on the wind, you know, something, or maybe flower petals falling, which would be kind of like that sort of joy. So you would have a different type of joy with a flower that's blowing in the wind. And then if you're doing that, you would have your flower on a diagonal, maybe in the corner. But the way you did it, what you did well is you have it, it looks like from your page, it's on a diagonal, but I think you have your page, it's very centered, which is good. And you have it straight up and down, which is good. And you have the one color, which is good. And I like your, the 2 parts coming out of the top, straight up, but then you have a little bit of curve happening there. So, so all of these things with your flower, so your flower feels very strong, and your flower feels very safe and very stable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not, it's actually, your flower does not feel very fragile, you know, because normally a flower, we think a flower is very fragile, it breaks easy, you know, you can crush a flower, right? But your expression of the flower, and I think because you were doing so much with the roots, like you pointed out the roots of the flower, which, so I don't know if I'm reading too much, but where my mind right away goes to with joy is that beauty that is rooted, and that's what makes it a strong flower. So that's cool. I like it.
Thank you.
I like it a lot, Betty. Well done. Yeah, that's so hopefully, yeah, so that's my hope, Betty, that you can understand, you can, how you paint a flower, you can paint it differently to say something different. So yeah, very good. Okay, so we have, let's see, Rebecca, yes, definitely. Uta or Rebecca? No, they're hiding today. No, Uta, you didn't get far enough. How about you, Rebecca? That's okay. It's always an invitation. Oh, maybe Rebecca had to leave. She's muted and her screen is off. So, okay. So I'll just show quickly my own here. Okay. So I just worked with the word. I just kept it very simple. Did the word, just wrote the word joy, you know, and I made it as obvious as possible. Okay. So this is one word, and then get that on it. And then this is the other one. Okay. So hopefully, so they both say joy, and hopefully it just becomes very obvious which one, you know, is vibrant and jumping up and down, exuberant, very dynamic. You know, if this joy was in a worship setting, it would be running around the area, you know, maybe this person, you know, or they were with flags, and they're really, you know, the flags are fluttering like crazy, and they're clapping and dancing, and okay. And then this one is, you know, this joy is much more meditative. They're maybe on their knees, you know, just very quietly listening, or they're at home by them, you know, by themselves. Okay. So, you know, and Yeah, and I don't think I need to talk about all the things again that I did to make them feel different. Hopefully I made that very obvious. Okay.
Rick, your one on joy reminded me of one I did just 2 days ago on joy, is similar.
Yeah.
And
The
the
bottom one,
curly
yeah, sorry.
is make it
Yeah,
dynamic, right?
let me just bring that up bigger on the screen. Oh yeah, look at that. Totally. Yes. Yeah.
Dynamic one.
Nice. Good. Oh, here's Rebecca. Did you want to
Can
show
you bring
yours,
it up
Rebecca? or
again,
not?
Teresa?
What's that?
Could you bring yours up again, Teresa? I missed it.
Oh, okay. It's nothing special. It just so happens 2 days ago, I did joy like he did, and I wasn't thinking about what's dynamic or static, but but that's how I think of joy, is always dynamic.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
And that's the whole thing, is you weren't thinking about it, but you were feeling it, and it happens.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, and that's where we, and that's where we want to be, is at the place where we don't have to think about it. Again, always you want to work towards being able to play jazz. You're doing jazz with your with your canvas. So, Rebecca, did you want to show yours?
Yes, please. And I did the words, and so I had a lot of fun doing it.
Okay.
So I'll show you the dynamic one.
Hold it still. Oh, did you have them all upside down? Oh, yeah, there you go. You actually have your letters all upside down, it looks like.
Yeah, at a diagonal, like it's taking a dive, and they're all kind of shaking and moving, and they always sort of like a cloud.
Yeah.
I think, and then with this little dots to show movement, and then the Y is kind of just joining them.
Awesome. Totally. Very good. Yeah, you're doing everything there.
And then the static, I tried different things, right? So
Mhm.
first one was writing joy inside a square, really contain joy.
Yeah.
Oh.
CCJOY,
I
very
do. Yeah,
contained.
totally. I see it.
Then I can't draw the letters hugging, so I kind of just place them close together like this, sort of.
Okay, but you know what?
Mhm.
I was going to say, I'm glad you didn't actually draw them hugging. You don't need to. It's not even necessary. Like you can,
Yeah.
and not that it's wrong to draw them hugging, but I'm simply saying just that, and that's what I want you guys to understand. That's the power of design, just an arrangement, just putting them close together.
Mhm.
So, if you added arms to them and had them hugging, yeah, sure, that would maybe, it would add to it, but I'm just simply saying you've actually said it already. Cool. Okay, sorry, I'd interrupt you.
No, that's okay. And then the third one is almost like yours, where it's more meditative and stuff. So the idea was joy on the surface. It's kind of starting to bust up, but very contained still. And then at the bottom, there's a lot of joy happening.
Interesting. So that, yeah. So there's that's even challenging. You're bringing out both of the expressions in that piece, I would say, right? And you're combining, you're bringing dynamic and static, the calm and the excitement both together.
Mhm.
Wow, good for you. Wow, that's like, you're giving yourself a challenge. There we go.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Also, I found on my sketchbook, when you were teaching us the flower sac drawing.
Yep.
So I just realized that I could use that also to show the dynamic and the static. So I had drawn my power cord.
Mhm.
So this would be definitely, let me see, where is it? Oh, here. This would be the static. Can you see?
Just hold it still. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not moving. And then the extreme was it busting out.
Moving all over the place, right? And then that one,
Yeah.
so much going on there. That's where it's
Yeah.
starting to feel chaotic, even.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this was drawn a while back when you were teaching about the sac flower. The
Great.
flower sac, yeah.
And it's all exactly. It's totally relates. It's all approaching the same sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah. And then that's the idea, is just to, yeah, to work with that again. So, okay. All right, well, we'll leave it at that. So Ute, I don't know if you just weren't finished or you didn't feel like sharing today. That's totally fine. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't.
I wasn't finished, so maybe I show it later in the group.
Oh yeah, yeah, you can just post it if you want. Yep, totally
Yeah.
fine. Okay, yep, that's totally great. All right, so that's our time. We, well, I suppose we include all our talking and laughing at the beginning. We went over 2 hours, but we did have a bit of a late start. So, all right, everyone, we'll leave it at that. I'll just shut off here.